have studied the factors that matter to labor productivity. So why we care about the labor productivity? This is because labor productivity essentially tells us how much each worker can produce. Okay, and then so why we care about how much each worker can produce, because that's essentially tells us the per capita income and per capita consumption, or eventually the well-being. So that's the logic, right? So there are several factors that matters to the labor productivity. These including physical capital. We use H, we use K, including human capital. Let's use H, and then so it's also including technology. Let's use Z. Now the next step, what we're going to do is we are going to put these together or try to find a link between this input to output. What's the output? Is going to be Y, which is the per capita output or labor productivity. Okay, so this is going to be called aggregate production function. So essentially, this is a hypothetical function that show how productivity, depending on the quantity of, now there are several factors, physical capital per worker, human capital per worker, as well as the state of technology, or in other words, the three factors we just talked about. So this production function is a connection between the three variables to the variables we are interested in. Right? To be more specifically, so this is how the function will look like. On the left-hand side is Y, we call it GDP per worker. On the right-hand side, so this T stands for technology. Sometimes use T, sometimes use Z, but they are the same thing, right? This refers to technology. And then on the right-hand side, so it relies on the technology, also relies on physical capital per worker. Like I said, you can use K. And then, so this human capital per worker, you can use this H. There are 0.4, 0.6. If you add them together, 0.4 plus 0.6 is equal to 1. In advanced class, you will learn this is what we call the constant, write down constant return to scale. What this means if your physical capital per worker and a human capital per worker grow in the same share, let's say we give them X and X, in terms of the output is going to grow by the same fraction or same share. So this is what we call a constant return to scale. So number one. Number two, so what this 0.0, what does this 0.4 and 0.6 means? Literally, this just means 0.4. That just means there are two means, but they're equivalent. One is the share of labor. Apologize, sorry, not share labor. The share of capital, okay, production, or the contribution to production. This is number one. Number two, so this 0.6 also is measuring so how we are going to compensate to the use of physical capital. Right. So certainly the larger the number, and then their share, their contribution, and then so the way we compensate is going to increase. The smaller and then less important, less contribution. You're going to compensate less for the use, right? So this is 0.4 and 0.6. But overall, so this equation just tells us if you look at two countries, if one country has larger K versus the other, and then this country is going to have higher labor activity. Similarly, if one country has more human capital compared to the other, and then this country is going to have higher labor productivity. Finally, T or technology is better, and then so you're going to have higher output per worker. So that's the logic, right? For this production function, there's some well-known patterns. It's very important. So the first thing is called diminishing return to physical capital. What this means, actually, so this example tells us what this means. When you move from no computer to with one computer, it's not easy, it's not hard to imagine, or actually everyone has that experience. When you got your first computer or your first car or your first cell phone, your productivity increase dramatically, right? And then, so this is, okay, so from your productivity increase from 0 to 1, so actually this is called margin productivity, right? Because we always think in the margin. Now just imagine you get some money, or your parents or whoever just give you the second one, like either a car, computer, cell phone. Now, if you look at the productivity gain from 1 to 2 compared to the gain from 0 to 1, and clearly, so the second one is going to bring you less benefit, right? So why this brings you less benefit? In this case, is because you have less attention, right? So you already have the physical capital. The second physical capital presumably is going to bring you less and less. So this is one interpretation. But the other interpretation, just imagine in a workplace or in the office, you have one you have one big computer, printer, right? So this printer is going to improve the productivity dramatically. Now you bring the second one, not only you don't need that much, even though you need that much, okay, but then so the office space becomes crowded. So that's going to reduce the productivity of the second one. So that's the source of diminishing return to physical capital. Again, what this means is the more physical capital you have, and then so the additional physical capital is going to lead to smaller increase in productivity. It's still increase, but in a slower and a slower pace. Okay, so this is how the function looks like. Okay, and here, so what are we going to do? So we look at how real GDP per worker, essentially, this is productivity. So that's what we're interested in. And then we are going to plot against physical capital per worker. Now, remember, so we have a principle we discussed earlier, it's called a ceteris paribus. Literally here just means we just going to fix T, and then we're going to fix H as given or exogenous. It doesn't change. Now we only vary the value of K and see how K is going to change your productivity. First of all, this increasing function, this is obvious. The more capital you have, the more you can produce. Now this curve is become flatter and flatter. Mathematically, this is called a concave. Concave means the slope of this curve becomes flatter. But then, so what is the slope of this curve? So the slope of this curve is just marginal productivity of physical capital. How we understand that? Okay, so essentially, if you just take 2 points and then you approximate with this slope, you just draw a line. So this is slope, essentially, right? So 2 points. And then, so the slope is going to equal to the vertical difference divided by the horizontal difference. But then, so the vertical difference divided by horizontal difference, what does that mean? That just exactly means if you increase, like per capital turn, how much output is going to increase. That's the slope means. Now, the slope is declining means marginal productivity of physical capital is going to decrease, right? So why it decrease? It just followed the discussion we just had in previous slides, right? Now, what else can help us in terms of production? Certainly technology, right? Not only so technology not only can help us to improve our technology. At some point, the technology growth can lead to the disappearance of diminishing return, or what this means. So maybe we can look at graph. It becomes clear. As I said earlier, so this is for a fixed T and a fixed H, right? If you have fixed T and fixed H, and then so the marginal productivity of physical capital is going to decrease. Curve is getting flatter. Not just imagine at the same time, there's a rising technology. Here stands for total factor. So here, so we use total factor productivity. So that just stands for the technology. And if there's a rising technology, when you increase in the physical capital, now instead you move from B to C, now you may jump from B to D, right? So I'm erase here and highlight. Just consider the following scenario. First, you move from A to B. Okay. Now in the next step, you're going to move from B to D. Okay. It should be very straightforward to see. It's very straightforward to see. The slope is getting steeper instead of flatter, number one. Number two, this implies the marginal productivity of capital along this dimension increasing instead of decreasing. But what brings this increase in marginal productivity capital? So here is coming from, you have a higher level of technology, or you just push up your frontier. So that's what happened, right? Or in other words, the sustainable technology progress will kill this diminishing return, will brings us increase in marginal return, right? So that's the power of technology progress. Okay. Now with this production function, there's interesting things we can do, or very important things we can do. So this production function will tell us, will answer the following questions. What caused the growth? Okay. Or in other words, we are trying to decompose the source of growth. Okay, decompose. Right, because there are three factors, K, H, and T. So there are three factors that matters to the increase in labor productivity. Right, and then so this production production function is going to tell us so how we are going to attribute the change in productivity to each factor. And this exercise is called growth accounting. So basically, we are going to take the production function as we saw earlier, and then based on this production function, we can estimate the contribution of each factor in aggregate production function. Again, so this each factor includes K, includes H, and includes T. So this growth accounting just tells us so how each factor contribute to the increase or improvement in labor productivity. And then furthermore, from this production function, we can estimate the total factor productivity. All right. So this total factor productivity is just the one interpretation is amount of output we can produce if you fix amount of factor input. Right. So remember, let me just quickly rewrite the equation. So you have Y, which is output per capital, output per worker or labor productivity equal to T times K. Right, so we give a particular example, 0.4 times H raised to the power 0.6. Now from here, so you can easily see, so T equal to Y, you can easily see Y is going to equal to, so Y is going to equal to, oh, sorry, so this technology always give me some trouble. T equal to, let me rewrite, T equal to Y divided by K 0.4, H 0.6. So this is literally interpreted as how much a worker can produce given the resources, right? So this is interpreted as T. Okay. So if T increase, and then the economy is going to increase their production with the same quantity of K and the same quantity of human capital, right? But then, so from this exercise, so there's some important implications. right? First of all, increase in total factor productivity are crucial. Again, so what is total factor productivity? Let me rewrite here. T equal to Y divided by K, usually 0.4, H 0.6. Okay, so this is T. This is per worker, how much they can produce given the physical capital, given the human capital. And certainly this also you should interpret it as the efficiency, like how efficient we are in terms of production if we have the fixed amount of physical capital and human capital. Right? Increase in this T is going to measure the economic effect of technology progress, right? Hence, so based on this discussion, so this T, the increase in T is crucial to our economic growth. Now let's see, maybe there are other factors matters. First question you may think about, so what about the natural resource, like oil, like gas, like minerals, or land? Right? But in modern world, so this is essentially this is after 1800 or after Industrial Revolution. After this 1800 or in modern economy, human capital or physical capital more important than natural resource. Okay? This is true for most countries. Right? So now we have seen the value or the importance of technology. Right. So so technology kind of tells you how much work can produce given the physical capital and the human capital. And the technology progress and the nature is going to lead to the improvement in the labor productivity. Okay. Now, if we look at history, so we can identify some big innovations in the recent history. So that brings to a tremendous increase in T, and certainly that just brings to economic growth. So this was done by Robert Gordon. He's a professor at Yale, and he found out the 5 big innovations. For now, we usually take that for granted, but in human history, and particularly this after 1900, it changed how we live, how we work, and improve our productivity and improve our standard of living dramatically. First is electricity. Second is internal combustion engine. Essentially, that's the car. The most car we are relying on the technology. 3 is running water and central heating. So this is probably less obvious for you why this matters. So this matters actually. This improve sanitation, improve public health, improve the health of worker, and then so that's in that sense it's going to improve their productivity. Because just imagine if people often get sick, or if they have very short lifespan due to the lack of sanitation, due to the public health measure, how would the labor productivity look like, right? So this is the third factor. Next one is modern chemistry. So the modern chemistry, so there are at least 2 benefits to us. Number one, modern chemistry provide many medicines that's going to cure many diseases. And second, the modern chemistry bring us with synthetic materials. So that's going to change how we work, right? Next one is mass communication, movies, and the telephone. Okay, so that's change how we work, how we collaborate, how the idea is going to flow, or how the idea is going to exchange. Right? So those are the 5. But then, what is going to happen next? Are we going to have more innovation or not? Robert Gordon, he's feel a little bit pessimistic. Okay, actually, so now let's see. So what was his prediction? This green line is what this is what Gordon predicts. Right, first clearly he identified 1900. There's exploding innovation comes to our society. That brings to tremendous amount of growth, the economic growth. And then, so he's a little bit worried, we kind of running out of idea, and eventually, so our economic growth is going to slowing down. Again, so this graph is the growth for Y, but this Y is largely coming from T, right? Because you have other factors, okay? You have other factor, but it's largely coming from T. I mean, in the long run, if you want to keep moving, if you want to keep increasing labor productivity, right? Because remember, so the K, if you only increase K, and then you have a diminishing return to capital, right? So you cannot sustain long-term growth. You must rely on this T to keep pushing your frontier. This is, again, this is what Dr. Gordon or Professor Gordon predicted. And this one, this curve, this is like a kind of wiggle line, no, not wiggle line, like stairs, whatever. So this is the actual growth, right? And so I want to highlight, so here, so we have, so we just combine two graphs. One is for UK, the other is US, okay? Other one is UK or US, okay. So why is because like US is kind of leader in innovation, okay? So that's why we have these two. But in general, it seems like, so we are following what it predicts. And then so the economy is going to slow down. But is that really is going to happen? Let's see. So hopefully we have some new innovation comes up. Right? Okay, so there's a question from the students. I was wondering, is that always 0.4 and 0.6? If you look at US economy, and particularly if you look at the US economy after World War II, so this number is roughly constant. It changed a little bit, fluctuates a little bit. To be precise, the number for US is 0.36 and 0.64. Okay, so in the US is roughly constant. It fluctuates. Okay? If you compare cross countries, this is going to be a little bit different. But if you look at it very long term, or if you think about in the future, so this number is going to change. By the way, so if this number increase, or in this number increase, means this number is going to decrease. What this means? If this number increase, that just means our economy relies more and more on physical capital. All right, so that's what it means. So certainly this is going to change a little bit. Sorry, is there a question? Is there any question from students? No. Okay. Right. So certainly this is going to change, but relatively this is stable. It may not change in a decade. It may change in like 2 or 3 decades. Right. But if we look at empirical data, so this is roughly like 0.4 and 0.6. This is roughly what we observe. Right. So now we understand what determines labor productivity. Right. So now we are going to see how this like matters, right? Or furthermore, why we cares about this, right? By the way, so this is what the economic growth looks like at night. And why we look at night? Because this is like one indicator. So like for some country, they can forge the numbers, right? But then so the sky night is not going to lie, right? So basically, so if you turn night, you can just use a satellite image to tell, okay, so who can afford or who have the light. Right, and then so here we compare North Korea versus South Korea, and this picture just show you so which country is more prosperous or more affluent or have higher labor productivity, right? Okay, so now let's see. So what why growth rate differs, or in other words, why we see a complete dark in North Korea, but when then so the night light has been lighted up in South Korea, okay? And certainly you can compare other countries, or in general, so why US is stronger or has higher labor productivity compared to other countries, pretty much every other countries in the world, right? So that's the question we're trying to understand. Okay, so based on the production function we have seen, and then we can summarize there are the following source: saving and investment spending. How this matters and why this matters, because that's going to improve or increase the physical capital. Education, how that matters, that's going to help us to improve the human capital. And the third, research and development, how that matters, that is going to improve the total factor productivity or technology, right? By the way, what is research and development? So those are spending to create and implement new technology. This can be done in the private sector, like a firm or business. Like say, for example, Google or Apple, those big company, they spend billions of dollars each year on innovation, right? Certainty, so they have their goal. So they're trying to make more profit. But then, so it's exactly because you can call they're greedy, right? Or their pursuit for profit push our technological frontier, right? And improve our labor productivity. Okay? So this is R&D. Right? Now we can compare a few countries to kind of justify those factors we talk about, or kind of understand those three factors, the value of those three factors in promoting labor productivity. Again, so what are those three factors? Let's go back. Right? Saving investment, linked with K, education, linked with human capital, research and development, linked with T. Right? Again, so this per capita term, right? I mean, so what we cares is per capita output. Okay. Here we comparing Argentina versus China. Okay. So if we look at 1950, Argentina is doing much better compared to in China in terms of years of schooling. But how this matters to the factor that we just talked about? Actually, this is regarding to human capital, right? So if you look at Argentina over times, it increases, it improves. Right? It seems like it actually improves a lot. Right? It's almost double from 4.9 to 9.3. Sorry, it's more than double. Right? However, the Argentina's growth is much less compared to China. So China, so their this average year of schooling. So this just means in 1950, it's pretty much everyone or very few people get the minimum education. Now in 2010, so this number you can see, so the growth is tenfold. It's tenfold. This just partially explain so their growth miracle as we saw earlier, right? So this is one factor, but certainly there are many other factors. So this not only matters here. So essentially, you may argue, oh, so this is for like two developing countries or two countries are not developed, not rich enough. But this is also true, or what we discussed also matters if we look at advanced economy. So here we compare in Germany, United States, and Italy. On the vertical line is total factor productivity. But again, so this total factor productivity is a key for the labor productivity, right? So US and Germany, so they're kind of track with each other, so they are kind of grow in a similar path. But Italy is kind of lag behind. What is lagging behind? But first of all, here, so they lag behind, and this immediately is going to implies Italy is going to do worse in terms of labor output. But then in the future slides, so we are going to see what are the potential reasons what are the potential reasons that drags Italy behind. Okay? So now, what the government can do in terms of promoting economic growth. So again, so there are three factors, right? And then the three things the economy can do. Now, specifically, what the government can do. So first, the government should subsidize to infrastructure. Why this matters? How this matters? So this is going to matter to the accumulation of physical capital, right? But what is infrastructure? So this includes roads, power lines, ports, information networks. Okay, why they're important is because that just provide the basic infrastructure, the basic capital for us to do business, to communicate. Okay. Secondly, so the government should subsidize to education. Why? Because that's going to promote the accumulation of human capital. Right? If you subsidize, like say for example, so in the US or in most advanced economy, the government provides free education from K to 12. So that's going to improve the educational level, improve the skill level of the worker. Okay. Third, the government should subsidize through R&D. That's obvious. That's going to promote the growth in total factor productivity. Right. So that's why the government has the agency that award grants to many research, to basic research, right? Next one, to maintain a well-functioning financial system. This is also important. So the important, at least in two dimensions. Number one, this is going to help the accumulation of physical capital. Number two, this is going to promote TFP by encouraging people to take risk, by encouraging people to innovate, right? Now, the other things the government can do, or in general, so the economy can do is to provide some protection of property rights. Why this is important is because this is going to provide you incentive to innovate. Just imagine if my innovation or my idea will be copied or will be steal easily by somebody else. Do I have incentive to innovate? Not really, right? Lastly, but not the least, we need political stability and a good governance. This is going to encourage investment. That's going to help the accumulation of physical capital. It's also encourage innovation. Okay, so those are the things the government can do to help to promote long-term economic growth. But certainly that's based on our understanding of the aggregate production function, right? And here's an example of the importance of infrastructure. Right? So this is something has been built by Roman Empire almost 2,000 years ago, right? So when these things was built, it provides the necessary or the essential infrastructure to allow the people in that region to prosper, right? Because they can use this to provide the necessary irrigation, okay, to prosper. Okay. Okay. Now here, there's another case study to highlight the importance of those factors. Right? During recent decades, Britain has been far behind compared to US and Germany. Germany is considered a powerhouse in a European country, right? One of the reasons is probably largely because the barrier of education, or in other words, the government may not have provided enough educational opportunities for their general population. Okay. Now, the other case study, what explains East Asian miracle? So by the way, so this East Asian miracle is referring to 4 economies. This including Taiwan, South Korea, Singapore, and Hong Kong, I believe. Okay. During the period of 1960 to 2000, their growth rate was extremely high. Remember, for US, long run average growth rate is less than 2%. But for those countries, we call it East Asia miracle country, or sometimes we call it East Asian tiger country. So their growth rate, average growth rate, is around 7%. Just imagine what would happen if they keep growing at 7% for a few decades, right? Because in 1 decade, they're going to double. Now, in 3 decades, they are going to achieve what United States has done during the past century. But what's behind their success story? And certainly each of those policy or each of those factors is going to link to the resource we need that promote economic growth, right? First is high saving rate, and the second, the good basic education, and third, substantial technology progress. Right? So those are things behind their growth. Okay. Now let's look at further examples. What is holding Argentina behind? We have seen this before when we start this lecture, right? So actually, we're comparing Argentina with South Korea, right? When this starts, Argentina is doing much better compared to South Korea. Now the South Korea is doing better than compared with Argentina. What's behind this divergence? Regarding to Argentina, so we find out there are 3 possible explanations. One is governance. right? So the government didn't do a good job, to keep their price stability, right? Or in other words, in their economy, they have people experience high inflation. If there was high inflation, and then people don't want to save. Okay, so there's a question when students ask, hasn't Argentina defaulted on their debt 9 times now? Yes, Argentina defaulted, right? So actually, so the default, there's 2 parts. One, so the government is lack the ability to pay off their debt. And certainly that just means their domestic economy is not doing well. On the other hand, there's a consequence. If you default, so what's the consequence of default? Just imagine if an individual, if you have a credit card, you default, or if you have a mortgage, you default. What's the consequence? It's going to make you very hard to borrow. If you have hard time to borrow, and then from the individual point of view, and then so you're going to very difficult to invest, or you are very difficult to expand your business, or you expand your capacity. Right? So that's so in that sense, if the government is irresponsible, okay, if they are irresponsible, so that's going to lead to large consequence, right? The second factor, lack of emphasis on education. That's clear. That's actually it's clear from what we saw earlier, right? So Argentina, yes, they double their average schooling, but compared to other countries, their progress wasn't enough. And the third, so there was political instability. So that's going to discourage investment, not in investment from domestic households. Also, it's going to discourage international investor come to invest in Argentina, right? So those are the things holding Argentina back. And here's we also have a African country, and usually so this African country doing poorly compared to not only to this Asian country and even for Argentina, for Latin American country. But then the question is, what is holding back Africa? Right? So yes, we can come out this standard explanation. So they have corruption, they have war, they have unfavorable geography. Okay? But this unfavorable geography may not be a good explanation, because if you look at worldwide, there are countries who don't have any advantage in terms of geography, but still they are doing extremely well. The example is, I think there are 2 examples. One is Singapore, the other is Switzerland. So Singapore is like a tiny island. So they have very little disadvantage, or maybe, sorry, I took it back. Singapore may not be a perfect example, because Singapore, they have port. So maybe so they have this geographic advantage in terms of shipping, right? So Switzerland is a completely landlocked country. Okay? Most of their land is not suitable for growing anything, right? But this country managed to achieve some economic miracle, right? Largely because of their governance, because of how they structure their economy. So they promote innovation, they promote financial sector, right? So this probably is not a good reason to answer why African is largely behind most of the other country, right? But then if we say, okay, it's corruption or civil war, political stability, that was the reason. But then, so there's like a chicken versus eggs question. The question is African poor because it's political unstable, or their political unstable is because they're poor? That's what this vice versa means, right? It's like chicken and egg. It's because the poor coming first and then they have bad politics, or because they start with bad politics, end up with their poor. It's a very difficult question, very challenging question, right? So Africa, not only they're poor, so they are suffering this like starvation, right? So these really, really difficult questions. But nevertheless, so there's like small good news. The growth rate is kind of ticking up in these sub-Saharan African nations since 2011. Okay, so there's some good news, but we will see. All right, so now I'm going to kind of close this part by looking at a convergence hypothesis. What is this convergence hypothesis? This hypothesis or this kind of theory says the international difference in real GDP per capita is going to narrow over time. Or in other words, countries tend to catching up with each other. Okay. What is behind this theory? The key idea behind this theory is the diminishing marginal return of physical capital. Just imagine you have two countries, poor versus rich. Poor country, they must have less capital, right? Let's call KP. That's here, so it's called KR. Right? Or in other words, KP is going to less than KR. P stands for poor, R stands for rich. Okay. Poor country should have less capital compared to rich country. Now, if each country invest or save $1 because of diminishing marginal return to physical capital, the poor country is going to generate more growth in output or more growth in labor productivity compared to a rich country. And that just means the poor country is going to faster compared to a rich country. If one is growing faster compared to other, and eventually this one is going to catch up with rich country. So that's what this convergence hypothesis comes from. This is coming from the diminishing marginal return to physical capital. Now let's see if this really happens in reality. On the left-hand side, it seems like it's happened. How we understand? On the horizontal line, you have real GDP per capita in 1955. That is right after World War II. On the vertical line, we look at per capita GDP growth in the period of 1955 to 2013. We plot those countries. And these lines kind of fit in these patterns. And what pattern we see? So clearly, there is a pattern that says higher Y leads to lower growth rate. Vice versa. Lower Y, higher growth rate. Okay. That immediately means those countries here eventually is going to catch up with country here. As a matter of fact, it is happening. Okay. Seems like if you look at the left-hand side or panel A, it seems like convergence is happening among those countries, but certainly we choose those wealthy countries, as you can tell. Now, if you look at right-hand side, and then we choose look at worldwide. Okay, again, so horizontal line and vertical line, same as we have on the left-hand side. Now, if you look at worldwide, and you can even look at by regions. Okay. Can we see any patterns? Not really. Very noisy, right? Or in other words, so this convergence hypothesis, it seems holds for a certain group, not for everybody else, right? Now, how we reconcile this convergence hypothesis with what we observed on B, or how we reconcile A versus B. Okay, the answer coming from the three factors that matters to growth: TFP, capital, human capital. So this convergence will hold true if a group of countries or two countries has the same T and the same age. The only difference is physical capital. And this largely holds for the country on the left or in panel A, those rich countries. They are different largely because of the war destroyed some countries' physical capital. But for those countries, they have similar institutions, they have similar technology level during the war. Okay. Now, if you look at the broader economy, if they are not only different in terms of K, they also differ in terms of T and H, then this is impossible to expect these convergence holds, right? To summarize, convergence hypothesis coming from the diminishing marginal return. Poorer you are, the faster you're going to grow. and then eventually you're going to converge or you're going to catch up with each other. But this convergence relies on two countries or set of countries has the same, they are the same in many other dimensions, but this is not going to hold, right? So this is okay. Now let's look at these practice questions. Okay. Economic growth can especially fast. So based on the discussion we have, the answer is going to be A. So this essentially refers to the three factors we just talked about, right? There's a video I will encourage you to watch. In this video, this actually, so Dr. Roslin passed away a few years ago, and he just tells us the growth patterns worldwide, right? It's very fun video to watch and very insightful. Now, the last topic we need to cover in this lecture is about sustainable long-run economic growth. And what is sustainable growth and why we care about sustainable growth? It's because usually the growth is going to put some challenge on natural resource and the environment. In terms of natural resource, it's because we have limited natural resource. In terms of environment, so the growth usually is going to cause some damage to our environment, or in other words, the clean, desirable environment is a scarce resource. Right? So in either case, so resources are scarce. Okay. So then the question for us is, what is the impact of limited natural resource on long-run economic growth? There are three important questions we need to answer, we need to address. Number one, how large a supply of key natural resource? But to be honest with you, so this is not necessarily a economic question. So this question should be answered by expert in geology. Number two, how effective will technology be at finding alternatives to natural resource? So for example, can we use solar energy or wind power to replace fuel fossil? Okay? Again, this may not be a right economic questions. But the third question is really actually a important and relevant economic question. Can long-run economic growth continue in face of resource scarcity? As a matter of fact, there's a competition or the race between resource and economic growth. Now let's see, so what would be our answer? Okay, so to summarize, there are three questions. So I'm going to focus on the third one. I'm going to skip the first two, right? So this is regarding the first. This is regarding to this, So this is regarding the second. Now let's focus on the third one. Okay. To rephrase this, how we achieve long-run economic growth when resource becomes scarcer and scarcer, right? If we look at this diagram, it offers some hope. Okay? What this diagram shows us, this after World War II, oil consumption, given here, real GDP per capita. Real GDP per capita is growing, right? So by the way, so this is, I believe this is I think this is worldwide or maybe US, but anyway, so you can see there's a growth pattern, right? So this is long-run growth. If we look at here and particularly look at time period before 1980, these just keep track with each other. If we keep this trend, what this means? That just means we are going to exhaust our oil reserve eventually. Meaning, so we are going to exhaust our resource. So that's going to be a big problem, big challenge, because usually modern economy relies on the oil. But fortunately, these things start to change, right? So there are two things happen. Number one, there was oil embargo, or there was the oil crisis. The oil price skyrocketed. So that just forced us to change our behavior. But secondly, this kind of immediately follow what happened in terms of oil price. People trying their best to find out what the alternative. So that's why we kind of push down this a little bit and change the course of this growth in oil consumption. So that brings some good news, right? But on the other hand, so what's the impact on environment? To understand the impact on environment, and we can look at the carbon dioxide emission. This is one measure, okay? And then we can look at different countries. Okay, look at US, look at Europe and China. And what was striking about this picture is that when country becomes rich and richer, their emission, their carbon dioxide emission, or their pollution problems getting worse and worse. Okay? If we keep, so like US is growing, right? So certainly there's kind of slowing down, right? But China's keep growing, right? So their carbon dioxide emission is growing rapidly. Okay. So how we are going to address this issue? To address this issue, economists has two market-based solutions. One is called carbon tax, the other is cap and a trading system. So what are these? So carbon tax is essentially a tax for each tons or each unit of carbon you emitted. This tax is going to put a cost for you to emit any carbon. And that's going to provide you an incentive to reduce your carbon emission. So this is carbon tax. What is cap and a trade system? So this just says, so for each producer, they have a total amount they're allowed to emit. Okay. Once they exceed this cap, they must buy license or they must buy a permission to emit any gas that can cause damage to our environment. But again, so this license they need to buy or the permit they need to buy is going to change their incentive. Not only change their incentive to emit, also it's going to change their incentive to innovate. Just imagine if someone is very good at reducing the emission, they have extra amount they can emit, but they don't need. What they can do is this trading system allow them to sell to other producers. Hence, for whoever is good at green energy, so they are incentivized to innovate, to reduce emission. These two are very similar, but they're a little bit different. Okay, so this problem is going to cover in your more advanced class, like intermediate or micro, or in environmental economics. Right. All right. So to summarize, in this picture, we focus on economic growth. Right. So we have studied the growth facts. We have studied the source of growth, and we have comparing different countries to see their experience and try to understand what's behind their growth experience. We wrap up this chapter by looking at sustainable economic growth. So that's essentially regarding to how we are going to deal with scarce resource and the potential damage to our environment. All right. So now let me just